It's a cutting-edge topic, and it really involves these three roles of the manager, the leader, and the follower. They're three distinct roles. They're not really positions. We talk about them as if they are positions, but they're not. They're actually roles that you probably are all operating in on every given day. Nobody really talks much about followership, but it's the role most of us are in most often. It's actually my favorite role of the three, and I'll expand a little bit more on why that is here in a second. So I wanted to take you through a personal strategic audit, and one of the things that I'm going to give you a chance to do tonight as I finish up with this is give you a chance to just assess your own ability right now in the leadership role, management role, and the followership role. It's not something you're going to be asked to share with everybody else. It's something for you personally to just take and get a sense of. But just to give you a little bit of a sense of how the MSL program came into being, thought I'd start with this topic. And anybody want to take or venture a guess at how long the average organization lives today? Throw some guesses out there. How long do you think an organization lives? From it's the time it starts to the time that it
15 years.
15 years? 100 years? Okay. Any other guesses? 10 years? Okay. 10 years? Okay. Actually, 10's a pretty good guess. The average organization lives about 12.5 years. They don't live long, you know. Now, you have organizations, somebody guessed 100, you have organizations like Mitsubishi in Japan that's been around for over 300 years. But there aren't many of those. There's a few in Europe that have been around a really long time. I know I worked for Wegmans Food Markets, and my last position prior to coming to Roberts Wesleyan was working as Wegmans Manager of Leadership Development. And Wegmans has been around since 1917. So Wegmans has been around a long time. Roberts Wesleyan's been around since 1866. And colleges typically have a longer lifespan, although I think there's some things that are changing that, and so we need to stay on top of that. But organizations, the whole point of this is organizations don't really live long. And actually with this kind of economy that we're in, organizations are what do you think's happening to that number? Going up or down? Yeah, it's going down. So the economy certainly has an impact on it, but the question then becomes, you know, how do we perpetuate that? Here's some other statistics. Of the original 100 companies that were listed in 1917 on the Forbes 100 list, only 13 have survived till today. Just to give you a sense of how short-lived organizations are. And then a second statistic, fewer than 10% of effectively formulated strategies were successfully implemented, according to Kaplan and Norton, who are Harvard professors. So not only are our organizations not living long, but strategy, which is one of the means that we have to perpetuating the life cycle of an organization, is apparently something we're not very good at. I mean, when Harvard's doing research and says, hey, only 10% of strategies are successful, that's pretty pathetic. I don't know any place where you have a 10% metric that gets celebrated. Yeah, hey, only 10% of the time we're good at it, you know. Not really something people are touting. And so when I came across this in my own doctoral work, I was really struck by that. I thought, wow, that's awful. We've got to change that. And I was working before I came to Roberts on a consortium of top 100 leaders from the top 100 organizations. I was representing Wegmans Food Markets. And we got into a discussion one day, and the discussion basically went along the lines of, gosh, you know, we're as a whole really not very happy with what we're getting out of our typical MBAs. And unfortunately, nothing else really exists out there. If you want to get a graduate degree in business, you've got one choice, and that's an MBA. And MBA enrollment has been on the decline for about 8 years now in the United States. I will personally tell you, I think there's still a place for an MBA. And some of you may be shopping around. I'd encourage you to look at the area MBAs because there's still a place for them. But one of the things I found in the work that we were doing at Wegmans was we really, more than we needed managers, we needed leadership at Wegmans. And we needed strategic leadership. We needed leaders who could really tie into the reason why the organization existed in the first place. And, you know, Bob Wegman, at the time I was there, was one of the, well, it was his dad and his uncle that founded the company. But I thought of him as a founder, and he was the impetus behind the company. And he was getting older, and he was, you know, and he's passed away since I left the company. And there's another generation. Danny Wegman, obviously, I think most people are familiar with Danny in our community. And then he's got two daughters, Nicole and Colleen, who are stepping up. And they have children now, and they'll probably take hold of this company because it's a privately held company. But the whole point is, though, is that leadership, that legacy of leadership needs to continue at Roberts. It also needs to continue in other organizations, and it's really lacking. We don't have a lot of good academic programs out there, I found as a practitioner, teaching people about strategy and about leadership. So, you get statistics like this. Now, if we just continue to do what we've been doing in organizations, you get what you call a probable future. The lifespan of the probable future is decreasing, and so you see I ran that out about 10 years. It's probably more or less about 2 years right now that you could just continue to do what you're doing and expect that you're going to get some kind of positive results. Things are changing in dramatic fashion right now, not just with the economy, but on all different kinds of fronts with the global marketplace that we're all experiencing and being affected by, whether that's directly or indirectly. So one of the cool things, though, about this is that we can voluntarily transform ourselves. We can voluntarily look for better opportunities. And those opportunities hopefully take us to a preferable future. They take us beyond where we are, and it's nice to be, you know, if you're in a good situation, to have the time, to set aside the time to say, you know what, we're doing okay, but couldn't we do better? And what does better look like if we decide to go that direction? And if you don't do that, well, actually that takes you on to some kind of new ideal that you've decided upon. But if you don't do that, what you're going to get is a crisis at some point. And then you're forced to do something. And many organizations right now are in this spot. Something's come along, whether it's the economy, whether it's the loss of a leader, something's happening. We're losing, our hold on that probable and nice hold that we had on the business place. And so what happens then is either the organization falls into collapse, or you do something dramatic and you change it post-crisis, and you put some kind of a tactical plan together to keep yourselves going. This point right here, whoops. Let's see if I can get this to work here. Got a laser pointer on this thing somewhere. Here we go. The nice thing about the voluntary transformation that you see here is that it's strategy that does that for us. Strategy is the tool that takes us from the probable place that we're at right now onto something better. The problem is, going back to the last slide, is that we're not very good with strategy. Most of us. And that includes a lot of the consulting work I'm doing. I don't see a lot of good strategists out there. And I wouldn't even tell you that I'm a master at it. I'm learning. I'm getting better all the time at it, because I'm working at Roberts, and it's affording me the opportunity to continue to work on my own study and my own growth. You know, one of the things I think that makes a great professor is a great student. And so, moving on. Paul Kearns, who this top quote is from, is an English gentleman. He works in human resources, actually. I love this quote by him. He says, "Strategic thinking is a very tall order, and very few mortals are up to it." He's basically saying, he's echoing that 10% rule and saying, you know what, not too many people are very good at strategy. And the reason is because when you look at the reasons why we're not good at strategy, it's because it requires a speculation on the future, which is an attempt to deal with the unknown. You don't know what's coming your direction. And strategy requires you to engage that. It requires a synthesis of enormous amounts of diverse information. I mean, you've got things like global warming right now that you have to stay on top of, and you've got the economy, and you've got commodities and so many different things that affect your possible future. Changes in technology rapidly change things, and strategy requires you to stay on top of those things, and that's not easily done. Number 3, it entails broad coordination and collaboration. If you're going to do strategy well, it's got to involve everybody in your organization. They all need to know what part they play in it. And that can be a challenge, especially if you've got a global organization where you've got people in multiple locations, in multiple cultures, multiple languages. It involves imperfect people, infinite possibilities, and dynamic environments. I love that quote because if we don't have we don't have one of our professors here. John Walker is one of the faculty. He's the faculty member you'd in all likelihood have for your first course in the program. And one of his sayings is that people are messy. We're not perfect. We're finite. We've got limits. We're not infinite beings. And so people are messy. People can be a challenge to work with. Leadership can be a difficult business. And that creates problems in and of itself. And then lastly, it demands more than strategic familiarity, but rather strategic agility. Here's one of the primary challenges with strategy and developing it in people. In most of the organizations that I've worked with, including Wegmans, which is a very strategic organization, as far as if you look at compared to other retailers and so forth. Most organizations, when they do strategy, do it for anywhere from a couple hours in the duration of a year to maybe a week it lasts at best. So imagine yourself as a golfer. If I gave you a set of golf clubs and said, here, use these for a couple hours today, and or use them for up to a week, and let's see how good a golfer you are. How good would you be?
Not very good.
Not very good, right? Same thing with strategy. If you're only practicing it for a couple hours to 1 week out of a year, how good are you going to get at it? And yet we sit around and scratch our heads and wonder why we're only getting a 10% success rate. It's because we just don't practice it enough. We've got to do more with strategy, and we've got to do more with teaching people how to strategize. So leadership, if you want to boil it down to its most basic definition, is influence. And the reason that leadership and strategy go together is because the only way that you can really impact, the best tool a leader can have for influencing an entire organization is the strategic framework. If you use strategy well, you'd be amazed how many people you can impact. You can impact an entire nation. You can impact the globe if you're really truly a strategic thinker and you know how to use the strategic process well. It's a whole lot different to influence one person than it is to influence a whole group of people. And the larger that group gets, the more challenging it can become. So strategy is the best tool that I can give to any leader in order to help you influence a broad coalition of people that are working inside an organization. Defining strategy, I love the definition provided by Miller and Dess. And they say it's a strategy is defined as the plans made or the actions taken in an effort to help an organization fulfill its intended purposes. Okay. It's not just planning, it's a lot more than that. And I think a lot of times people think, well, I plan, so therefore I'm a strategist. Well, no, there's a little more to it than that. What are your intended purposes? Why do you exist in the first place? And where do you want to go with those plans? The thing about effective strategy is that it perpetuates the life cycle. It transforms intangible strategic concepts and theories into tangible and favorable outcomes of choice. The cool thing about strategy when it's really done well is you don't have to sit back and just be a victim of what comes at you. You can actually go out there if you're a really good strategist and you can shape future outcomes. And that's one of the things I love about it. It takes the victim mentality away that we are it so pervades our society today. So that's a big piece of this. So here's a little piece on the 3 roles and how they're different. Many of you are already aware of this, but one of the things that gets confused in all this is many people talk about leaders and managers being the same, and they are not. They are separate roles. Increasingly, the research that's coming out of Harvard and other places is finding that leadership and management are two very different roles, and I will tell you this, we need both. One is not more important than the other. Okay? The challenge is we've been studying one a lot longer in all reality, and teaching one in colleges a lot longer than the other. And so if you look up here at this, and I'll read it because it's kind of hard to see at the distance that you guys are probably at. Leaders are responsible for the strategic things that go on in strategy. And by strategic, that means motivating and inspiring, creating unity despite diversity. People are very diverse. How do you get them all to agree on one thing and move in one direction together? It's kind of like herding cats sometimes, you know. Driving necessary changes. When change becomes necessary, you need leaders to drive people through change because people don't like change. So it takes somebody that can inspire them to overcome the resistance to change, and that takes a leader. Leadership also is responsible for clarifying the identity of the organization, supplying perspective, giving the big picture, and then setting the priorities. And then down here, the last one I have is providing vision and a vision for a compelling future. Something that people can look at and say, you know what? Yeah, I'd like to be there. You know, that's where I'd like to be. And that if it means this for me, then and it's favorable, then you're going to get buy-in from various members of your organization. And all that is meant to create inertia and produce change. That's the leadership role. That's what leadership does. And if you do that well, you set up the next role, which is management or managers. They do the tactical aspects of strategy. What's that mean? That means they assess and measure. They problem solve and deal with complexity. And we're seeing more and more complexity. I just went to get a phone not too long ago, and I went in the store, the Verizon store, and I said, I just need a phone. Oh, right over here, sir. And he hands me this phone. He says, yeah, that one's got texting and a couple games on it. And I said, no, you don't understand. I don't need all that stuff. That's just more complexity than I need. Just a phone, just to make phone calls remotely. Well, this one over here is pretty close to that. It's got it's got a camera on it. And I said, no, I don't want a camera. I just want a phone.
We don't have one.
Turns out they didn't have one. They didn't have one in that whole store that was just a phone. So I had to go to Walmart and get it. You know? Yeah. So dealing with complexity, that's something that managers do, the managerial role does. Enhancing quality and efficiency, that's something managers do. Organizing and staffing is something managers do. Allocating and deploying resources is something managers do. And if they do all of this well, what you get is maximizing of people and processes. That's what managers do. They maximize people and processes in organizations. Okay? Gets associated a lot with leadership, but it is not leadership. That is management. Separate role. Execution is the last one. It's the followership role that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody has any interest in it. It's probably where most of us started when we started with the organization that we're in, is in the execution role. And what's required here in the strategy process? You can do the strategy well and the tactics, but if you don't execute it, you're going no place. There's even a book written on it called Execution, in which a leadership author blames basically followers and says, you guys don't implement our stuff, otherwise we'd be more successful. I think some of it is, some of the blame is really belongs to each of these roles. But the execution role, what it does is, it's committing to a purpose larger than oneself. If a person can't do that, then they're not going to be a very effective follower. It requires follow-through, delivering service, innovation, because you know what? This doesn't always go according to plan. So you need to have people on the front lines that can innovate and say, whoa, I guess that's not working, so I better try something else. I'll do a variation on that. And that's what good execution does. And it provides courageous feedback back to the leadership and the management. It says, you know, this isn't working, or this, you know what, this was great. We got to do more of this. And when all of this happens well, what this role is going to get you is it gets results and it satisfies needs of significance. It's very gratifying. One of the things I love following a good leader. It's very gratifying. At Wegmans, I loved, following the leadership that I had there. There was nothing more gratifying than serving the customer for me. It's been hard for me actually to stay in this role sometimes, because I need this gratification from time to time. Can anybody relate to that? You know, you get there, you're doing the management and you're doing the leadership thing, but it's kind of nice. In fact, one time, I'll never forget, one of the store manager that I was working under at Wegmans said to me at one point, Joel, we got this customer, and she's very upset. She just called very irate on the phone, and I was his HR representative in the store. He says, I don't really want any of the other employees to handle it. I want you to handle it. You handle conflict well. I'd like you to go and address it. I said, okay, well, what's the problem? He said, well, when whoever packaged her groceries packaged her soap in with her meat, and the soap broke open and got into the meat, and she had, $20 worth of meat there that got ruined because of the soap. And I said, okay. He says, so here's what I did. He says, I've got all the meats that she bought replaced. All the groceries she bought today I replaced. And here's $100 worth of groceries for her. And I said, how did you know what to get? He says, I pulled up her Shoppers Club. And I found out what she buys most often. And I just put $100 worth of that stuff in there. And he says, I know you probably don't want to do this. I said, are you kidding me? I'd love to do this. He goes, she's pretty nasty. I said, don't worry about it. I got it. So I picked up all those groceries and I drove to her house, and she came to the door and she was angry. I mean, she was still mad. I said, hi, I'm from Wegmans. She says, uh-huh. Well, if you think you're going to come here and apologize to me and it's just going to be okay, then I said, no, I don't think it's going to be just an apology. Obviously, we need to do more than that. I said, here's your groceries that you bought today. I've replaced them all. And here's $100 worth of groceries in addition. She took a look at that grocery bag and she says, the soap, how did you know I like this soap? And I said, well, we used your Shoppers Club information and tried to take our best guess at what you like. Oh, Wegmans is so great, and man, it felt so good. I knew I was going to get those warm fuzzies out of this whole thing because Wegmans had taught me how to do that. And so all three roles. Now, and let me ask you this. Anybody here a parent? Okay, many of you. Can you be a parent and a professional at the same time? Okay, hope so, because most of us are required to be that, right? You can be all three of these and be the same one person. You can be a triune entity, and I'm just challenging you tonight that that's what you need to be if you're going to be a good strategist. You need to be one part strategist, one part tactician, one part execution. And if you can do all three of those things, and that's what really is essential today in organizations, it will make a difference for you as a person. It will make a difference for you as a professional in your organization if you can do all three of those things well. Because I'm telling you right now, the average person today cannot. And it's not because they're stupid or anything's wrong with them. It's because we haven't trained them the right way. So that's really something we're about here, Roberts. One of the quotes I pulled up here is Warren Bennis on the right there. Warren Bennis said recently that most failing organizations are overmanaged and underled. And John Cotter, who's a Harvard professor, he's on the left, he basically said the same thing. He didn't say most failing organizations. He said most organizations he has consulted with are overmanaged and underled. We have not been doing justice to the leadership position. We have not been teaching strategy like we should be. And so at Roberts, we're trying to change that, because the reality is that if you're going to be in a leadership position, John Maxwell has a book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and his number one law is the law of the lid. And basically what it says is that leadership ability determines an organization's level of effectiveness. So you're only going to be as good as the leader is. And that puts a big burden on the leader to know how to do the things that they need to do, both as a leader and as a strategist, which means they got to learn how to manage and execute. And
fish thinks from the head.
What's that?
Fish thinks from the head.
Yeah, the fish thinks from the head. That's absolutely right. So I love this quote I pulled in from Charles Schwartz, and he says that when we assume positions of leadership, we make decisions that don't just affect us alone, they affect numbers of others. These decisions loom in the near and immediate future, and our responses to them will shape lives, not just our own, but the lives of other people, and has an impact on success of the organization for years to come, whether it's success or failure. So We need leadership training now more than we've ever needed it. You know, if you're a manager and you're working on refining things and making things more efficient, you've been cutting costs now in this economy for 2 years, because we've been in this for 2 years. You're pulling your hair out right now if you're a manager. And the organizations that are really doing well right now are ones that have leaders in their ranks that can rise and say, you know what, we're going to have to innovate, folks, because we don't know how long this is going to last. And so we're going to have to try some new things. The old stuff isn't necessarily working. And that's what's required right now. So, you know, the MBA came about in 1908. And in 2008, Roberts Wesleyan College started an MSL. There's only a few of these out there. I'm telling you, you watch, you will see these in greater numbers as time goes on. The MBAs out there are trying right now to change their focus from management to leadership, because they know on some level they're slowly getting the message that this is what's needed out there. And I just wanted to give you some background on what we're about here at Roberts Wesleyan with these programs, and specifically tonight with the MSL program. This is the next generation graduate business degree.